Today, we're interviewing Bob Lerner, who is the author of a new book from the Lessons from History series. Bob's book is entitled Entrepreneurship and Ethics in Ancient Rome, the Management Lessons of Pliny the Younger.
He was like a Renaissance man, 1,000 years before the Renaissance, almost 1,500 years before the Renaissance.
These historical projects were absolutely pushing the technology of its time to its limit.
Father died when he was young. We really don't know that much about him, but we discussed Pliny the Elder earlier, who helped raise him. But Pliny the Elder was killed when Mount Vesuvius exploded because the elder Pliny was involved in trying to rescue citizens of local towns that were threatened by the eruption, and he commanded a boat and a small fleet to try to rescue people, but ultimately was killed in that. So very poignant time for Pliny. Very, fortunate for us, he actually didn't accept an invitation from his uncle because he was with him. The uncle said, "Hey, you want to go look at this eruption up close?" And the younger Pliny said, "No, I have to study." So it kind of gives you a sense a 17-year-old boy might choose to study instead of go look at an eruption. Gives you some insight into Pliny, and also fortunate for us, obviously, because if he went, he wouldn't have survived. We talked a little bit about Pliny's emphasis on justice and fairness. He worked very hard to be an ethical and fair man. He wouldn't have described himself as a businessman. He would have described himself as a senator with business interests or farming interests. And so we would consider Pliny, based on what he wrote, as an ethical businessman. But Pliny would not have described himself as a businessman. So technically he was ethical, and he was involved in business, but you shouldn't think of him as a businessman like you think today of a businessman. Wall Street bankers have kind of received a black eye for perhaps putting their own self-interest before everything else in a way that caused tremendous dislocations in not just this economy, but the economies of multiple countries in the world, leading to the recession of 2008. I thought it was a good time to put up, if you will, a paragon of ethics, someone who tried very hard to be ethical thousands of years ago. And maybe those lessons can help people recognize there is real value, not just in learning from the past, but applying those lessons from the past to today. And, if you will, stretching to be a little more ethical in our day-to-day activity. An aristocratic senator, first and foremost. He had business interests. And it's interesting to go back to my comments about Cicero as his role model. Cicero actually wrote that businessmen were vulgar and, in fact, talked about them lying in most anything they do to make a sale. So Pliny, as much as Cicero was his model, recognized that he had to deal with his vendors, and he recognized that you have to deal with these people. And so I think Pliny, over the intervening roughly 150 years from Cicero's death, recognized that you had to be, as we've talked about, an ethical businessman, and other business people you deal with aren't necessarily bad. It was unique, but we have to remember, Pliny was also a large landowner. Many of the ancient Roman senators owned land. That was thought of an honorable way to make money, if you will, and then to pass it on to your children. So they were in business anyway. They had to deal with the issue of buying and selling items for their estates. So there were aspects of business in whatever they did. So I don't think he was unique in that respect. What I find unique is this is one real business example that was written about. Now, obviously, a lot of ancient texts didn't survive the intervening 2,000 years, but at least he took the time to write about it in a way. There are other examples I show of ancient businessmen in the text. Examples of a baker who has a tomb that still exists in ancient Rome, but we can only tell from him what he left written on his tomb and the way he designed that tomb. There's a fish sauce maker from ancient Pompeii, and we can learn from him, from a family tomb, as well as things he wrote on the containers, pottery containers of his fish sauce. So we learn things about ancient businessmen, but we don't have a letter like we got from Pliny. So in some respects he was unique, but much of what he dealt with, and the reason he publicized this, the reason he wanted to publicize it, was if I've done something good for my estate, perhaps other estate owners can learn from that. So yes, there were other business interests, and he was not unique in that respect.